Try harder, push further, never stop improving. That's what we've been told our whole lives. But here's what no one mentions. All that striving can quietly become its own kind of suffering. More effort doesn't always mean more clarity. Sometimes it means less. The Buddha discovered something that runs completely against everything we've been taught. That the untrained open mind, the one that isn't grasping for answers, often sees most clearly. Not by doing more, by doing less. Today I want to share what that actually looks like, and why the pause you've been avoiding might be exactly where you need to go. In northern India, in a place called Bodh Gaya, there stands a tree. About 2,500 years ago, a young man quietly settled beneath it. The air before dawn was cold. The world around him was still dark. There was almost no wind, only the faintest trembling of leaves in the silence. His name was Siddhartha. Born into royalty, he had walked away from every comfort he'd ever known and spent 6 long years in relentless spiritual practice. But on that particular morning, he had made one simple decision: not to achieve anything, not to reach anything, just to sit. How deep that quiet resolve really was. That's the story I'd like to tell you today, slowly and gently. For years he had chased truth, the way a man in the dark chases a candle flame, always reaching, always a step behind. But that morning, he set down the reaching itself, the way a traveler might finally lower a stone he had carried so long he'd forgotten it was heavy. And in that letting go, something the night air itself seemed to notice. The leaves stilled completely, as though the tree were holding its breath alongside him. Dawn had not yet broken when a cowherd girl named Sujata passed by, and seeing him seated there, offered him a simple bowl of rice milk, not knowing who he was, only that he looked like someone who had stopped running. Siddhartha left home at 29. He had grown up surrounded by every comfort imaginable: a beautiful wife, a child he adored, a life free from want. And yet one day, he stepped outside the palace walls. He saw an old man, bent with age. He saw someone wasting away with illness. He saw a person who had died. For someone raised inside such sheltered abundance, it was a shock that shook him to his core. Why, he asked himself, is life so filled with suffering? The question would not leave him. He set out on the road. India in those days was alive with wandering seekers, and he found his way to many of them. He apprenticed himself to masters of meditation, reaching the very heights they said were possible. And yet, something was missing. The root of suffering wasn't there. So he turned to a different path: extreme asceticism. He stopped eating. He held his breath. He pushed his body to its absolute limit. Fellow practitioners walked beside him. He grew so thin that his ribs pressed through his skin, and later accounts say you could touch his stomach and feel his spine. But the answer didn't come. Not after all those years. One day, walking by a river, he collapsed. His body had crossed the line. A village girl named Sujata happened to pass by. She offered him a bowl of rice porridge. He accepted it. At that moment, the companions who had practiced alongside him turned and walked away. They believed he had given up. Without a glance back, they left. Siddhartha was alone. He walked to a tree near a place called Gaya and sat down beneath it, the tree that would one day be called the Bodhi tree. And he made a quiet vow: I will not rise from this place. Even if my flesh rots and my bones crumble, I will not rise until I have seen clearly. But look carefully at where he was in that moment. He was not trying to become enlightened. 6 years of practice had not brought the answer. The drive to achieve had burned itself out completely. His companions were gone. He had no teacher. He had nothing left. He simply sat there. As the night slowly gave way to dawn, something inside him began to settle. The stories say temptations arose: fear, craving, regret about the past, dread of what was to come. But he didn't fight them. He didn't flee. He simply stayed. He watched. And then as the morning star lit up the sky, Siddhartha opened his eyes. What he found is what the world would come to call enlightenment. But on that morning, the state he sat in was one of having nothing. It was the place before searching, the place where even the questions had been set down. He did not stand up with something new in his hands. He stood up having finally put everything down. The begging bowl was still empty. The robe on his back was worn thin. Nothing about the world around him had changed. The river still ran, the birds still called, the village girl had long since gone home, and yet he smiled. Not the smile of someone who had found what they were looking for, but the smile of someone who had stopped looking and discovered that the ground beneath their feet had been solid all along. He walked back toward the world, one step at a time, carrying nothing. The same road that had once led him away from the palace now led him simply forward. So what can we take from this story? There's a phrase in Japanese, returning to beginner's mind. It's familiar and well-loved, but I wonder if we've quietly misunderstood what it means. Most of us hear beginner's mind and think, recapture your motivation. Remember the passion you felt when you started. Revive that burning enthusiasm and move forward again. But is that really what it means? When Siddhartha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, there was no motivation left in him. 6 years of effort had consumed it entirely. The passion, the willpower, the methods, all of it was gone. His companions had left. He had no teacher. Nothing remained. What he returned to wasn't enthusiasm. It was emptiness. This is where Buddhism locates the true meaning of beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is the state before reaching for anything. No expectations, no clinging, no image of how things should be. Just being here, that clean, open, uncluttered state. So why do we lose it? This is the part that matters. The suffering doesn't come from moving too slowly. It doesn't come from things not going as planned. It comes from a line we've quietly drawn somewhere inside ourselves. I should be this far along by now. I should be capable of this by now. And the gap between that invisible line and where we actually stand, that gap is what we feel as failure, as regression, as the desperate need to start over. But that very anxiety is already a departure from beginner's mind. Buddhism calls this invisible should attachment. And here's where we have to be careful. Trying hard to let go of attachment is itself a form of attachment. Telling yourself to return to beginner's mind is itself a step away from it. When Siddhartha sat down, he wasn't thinking, I need to return to beginner's mind. He simply had nothing left to hold. Pause here for a moment. Consider this. What is the self really? Buddhism says there is no fixed, unchanging self. Who you are right now is a gathering of every experience you've lived through, every person you've met, everything you've learned, every failure you've survived. The you who lost beginner's mind and the you who was once full of enthusiasm are both just shapes that formed from the conditions of that particular moment. In other words, there is no original true self sitting somewhere waiting for you to return to it. Beginner's mind is not a place, it's a state. It's the feeling of an open hand, holding nothing. A craftsman in Kyoto once told me that after 40 years of making ceramics, he still approaches the clay each morning as if he has never touched it before. Not because he has forgotten what he knows, but because he has stopped needing his knowledge to protect him. He wasn't trying to feel that way. He simply had no argument left with the clay. That image stayed with me. No argument left. Not peace achieved, but resistance exhausted, like a stone in a river that has finally stopped trying to be somewhere else. And perhaps that is the quietest truth here. Beginner's mind doesn't arrive when we invite it. It arrives when we stop blocking the door, not through discipline, not through effort, but in the same way sleep finally comes when we give up trying to force it. So how does this actually show up in the lives we're living? Think about work for a moment. When you started a new job or moved to a new workplace, everything felt fresh at first. Even small things held a kind of discovery. A colleague's offhand comment, a single step in a process, it all felt alive and new. But a few years in, that freshness quietly disappeared. The same tasks began to feel repetitive. A tiredness set in that sleep couldn't seem to fix. I want to feel the way I did at the beginning, you think. But you don't know how to get back there. Most people respond by trying to add something. A seminar, a new book, a list of fresh goals. And for a while it works, then it fades again. Why? Because they're trying to solve the problem by adding more fuel. But the real issue isn't that something is missing. It's that somewhere along the way, a standard appeared. This is what my work should look like. This is who I should be by now. The exhaustion comes from the constant gap between that standard and where you actually are. Returning to beginner's mind means noticing the standard. I've been gripping something without realizing it, and simply noticing, sometimes that's enough for the grip to loosen slightly. Now think about the people closest to you, with someone you've known for a long time, a family member, an old friend. Does this sound familiar? In the beginning, everything about them surprised you. The way they thought, the things they said, it all felt genuinely interesting. But over time, a settled picture formed. This is just who they are. You start to know what they'll say before they say it. You stop really listening. In that moment, you're no longer seeing the person who's actually in front of you. You're seeing the person you've constructed in your mind. In Buddhist terms, you've formed a fixed image, an attached idea of who they are. And every time the real person diverges from that image, something in you resists. Why won't they change? Why don't they understand? That resistance is where the suffering lives. But stop and ask yourself honestly, has this person really not changed at all? Or have I simply been seeing a fixed picture of them, rather than who they are today? One of the things Siddhartha understood beneath that tree was this: everything is always changing. People, situations, the self, nothing stays the same for even one breath. He didn't just think this, he saw it deeply, in a way that went beyond thought. That seeing was part of what awakening meant. Returning to beginner's mind doesn't mean consciously deciding to see someone as if for the first time. It means catching yourself, noticing the fixed picture you've been carrying, just noticing it. And sometimes in that moment of noticing, the picture softens on its own. A man once told me he'd been married for 30 years, and one evening his wife laughed at something on the radio, a short, unguarded laugh he didn't recognize. He said it stopped him completely. He realized he'd been living with his memory of her, rather than with her. That single laugh cracked the picture open. He didn't try to manufacture that moment. He didn't attend a marriage retreat or read a book about intimacy. The crack appeared simply because, just for an instant, reality arrived faster than his fixed image could. So, what can you do, starting today? Just one thing. That's all I want to offer. Tonight, before you sleep, give yourself 5 quiet minutes of doing nothing. Put down your phone, turn off the television, just sit still. Your eyes can be closed or open, it doesn't matter. Don't try to think about something. Don't try to regulate your breathing. Just sit. Things will start to surface. Today's events, tomorrow's worries, words someone said to you, words you never said. They'll keep coming, one after another. When they do, don't try to solve them, just watch. So this is what was on my mind today. That's all. Simply observe from a slight distance. This is the smallest possible echo of what Siddhartha did beneath the Bodhi tree. He wasn't trying to gain anything. He was just sitting. He was just watching what arose. How could something so simple change anything? You might be thinking that. And honestly, I can't promise it will change something. But there may be a moment when you notice what you've been gripping so tightly. There may be a night when you think, quietly, oh, this is where I am. That is Buddhism's modest but sincere answer. A farmer I once heard about kept a single candle on his windowsill. Not for light, he said. He had electricity, just to have something that burned quietly while he sat at the end of the day. He never called it practice. He never called it anything. But his daughter told me that in his final years, he seemed to carry less, somehow, than other men his age. He didn't arrive somewhere. He just kept sitting with that small flame, night after night, until the gripping loosened on its own. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is, in fact, everything. And maybe you too have something like that candle already. A cup of tea you hold with both hands, a chair by a window, a particular hour when the house goes quiet. You never named it. When was the last time you were somewhere, with nothing to carry, nothing to prove, just there? There's no need to answer quickly. Just let the question rest on your pillow tonight. Maybe you were 7 years old, lying in the grass watching a cloud dissolve into blue sky, and no part of you wondered what came next. That child didn't need a meditation cushion or a teacher's blessing. She already knew how to be nowhere else. We spend decades trying to find our way back to what we never actually lost. A monk once told me he traveled to 3 monasteries searching for stillness, only to find it waiting for him in his own kitchen, in the pause between setting down a cup and reaching for the next thing. The cup had been there every morning. He had simply never stopped long enough to notice its weight leaving his hand. And perhaps that is the real practice. Not the sitting, not the chanting, but the 10,000 ordinary moments we rush past on our way to becoming someone who has arrived. The openness you rediscover when you return to beginner's mind is deeply connected to something we explored in a previous teaching, the practice of keeping curiosity alive, no matter how long the path has been walked. You'll find that episode linked in the description below. By the time Siddhartha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, 6 years of searching had left him with nothing. No motivation, no method, no companions, no teacher. Nothing at all remained. And that is exactly why that morning arrived. We tend to hear beginner's mind as an invitation to recover something we've lost. But maybe it's not that. Maybe beginner's mind isn't something you go back to find. Maybe it's something you suddenly notice, already there, when you stop looking so hard. The years you've lived don't disappear. The wounds, the regrets, the tiredness, they're yours. They're your story. You don't need to leave any of it behind. Just for this one moment, look at what's in your hands. What are you holding on to right now? If you can carry that question through today, that's more than enough. Thank you, truly, for being here with me today. Not just in this room, but in this life, exactly as it is. The Bodhi tree didn't ask Siddhartha to arrive unburdened. It simply stood there, rooted, while everything finally stopped moving. Perhaps that is all any of us are ever really asked to do. Stand still long enough for the ground beneath us to be felt. A farmer in Nara once said he never chose the moment to harvest. He just learned after many seasons to stop walking past the field. And maybe that is harvest enough. Not the grain itself, but finally pausing at the edge, finally letting the field be seen. The walking past is not wasted. It is what teaches the feet to stop. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.